Are you disappointed in your marriage or relationship? Are you missing that sense of togetherness that you used to have or the intimacy? Do you want more life in your relationship? I get it. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and I've been married 7 times, each time to the same man, and each time for just 5 years. I'm also an award-winning author and teacher, and the architect of something that is a better I do, a 5-year marriage. So here's the thing. Marriage gets wonky. Stuff happens. Life changes. And when it does, it changes you, changes how you think, changes how you feel. And when you change or your partner change, it changes the marriage partnership. But you know what? All that's normal. The problem today is that you don't sit down and talk about those changes. You get laid off, you move, you become a parent, stuff happens. And if you're not keeping in touch with each other to figure out how those changes have affected you and affected your relationship, you sort of end up going in different directions. Some people say, well, we fell out of love. You didn't fall out of love. What you fell out of was communication. You stopped knowing who that person was that you're sleeping with. And how can you love somebody you don't even know? You can't. So what you end up doing is you either end up breaking up or staying together but living out of sync with a lot of unclear agreements and misunderstood communications. And that leads to disappointment and resentment and anger. And that's no way to live. And that's why you need to stop right now. Take a deep breath and rethink, regroup, and reset your relationship. This webinar is your first step. And in it, I talk about different things about a relationship, and I give you the ACE method for resetting your relationship and tell you about the curiosity conversation, which is the all-important first step in resetting your relationship. So go ahead and watch the webinar, and when you get to the other side, I have a gift for you. And I look forward to seeing you then. Enjoy. So the 5-year marriage, what we do in the relationship reset is we're reorganizing, refreshing, and we're tuning things up. And so what we'll be talking about today is, what is a relationship reset? What does it do for you and for your relationship and for your marriage? And there's 3 critical parts. I call it the ACE method, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the thing that people always ask me when we're talking about the relationship reset is like, so I get the ACE part, but how do you actually get it started? So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps, and then I have a gift for you at the end of our time. So before I talk specifically about what a reset is, I want to tell you Stellas story. I ran into Stella. I was in a small local theater, and I was waiting for the play to start. And a woman came up to me, and she was a woman I'd met her at least once. I might have met her twice. She knew my spouse, and she came up and started talking to us, but she knew the work that I do. And she, in minutes, started sort of spilling her guts about what was going on in her life. I think I might have asked her, how are things going? And she really spilled her guts. And you have to know that when somebody's doing that to somebody they barely know in a very public place, that whatever is on their mind is like right at the top of their mind, because otherwise they would be probably a little bit more judicious about how they shared it. But Stella, it was right here in Stella's mind. And what happened was that she said that her spouse had been a corporate executive. And she was the stay-at-home mom. She took care of the kids, the house, all of those things that were important to running the show while he was off traveling to different locations with his job. There was always the expectation that when he retired, that they would then be doing things together. And always in Stella's mind, that was like, I'm doing this so that we can go back to how we were at the beginning. That was her mindset, that we're going to go back to how we did it. We were at the beginning, and she was looking forward to that. And finally, he retired. But unfortunately, very soon after he retired, he found out he had prostate cancer. So she was explaining how they got that, that was a rough year with prostate cancer, but that they worked it together. How she put it was, but we worked together and we beat it together. So she was still, very much into that partnership piece. On the heels of the prostate cancer, once he was well, she said, and he just bought a condo in Florida and a new boat, and I don't even like Florida. And she just blurted that out and stopped. And she looked at me for what seemed like a long time. And then I said to her, well, it seems to me what you need to do is renegotiate your agreements. And again, she looked and she stared like she was trying to process it. And then all of a sudden I saw the click. She's like, you're right. That's exactly what I need to do. And for Stella, that's how she got, I like to say that's how Stella got her groove back. But that's when it clicked in her head that she needed to have that conversation with the guy that she was with and talk about things like their expectations and their agreements. Once Stella knew what to do, it wasn't a hard thing for her to get it done. It's better, the thing is, in the past, what happened, and I talked to so many women over the years with both 5-year marriage and victorious woman. In the past, it seemed like we didn't have a lot of options. I often heard women say, well, it's like this now, but when we get to be empty nesters, it'll be different. Or the other thing is they kind of go their separate ways. They have separate lives. They get together like with the crowd on Saturday night with their friends, and they have dinner. They get together with the kids for holidays. So from the outside, it looks like they're just a regular couple. But the truth is, he does his thing, she does her thing. Maybe they have dinner together, maybe they don't. Maybe they watch TV together, maybe they don't. But their lives are separate. They aren't together with how they're living their life. The other alternative is just to leave. And in recent years, gray divorce has skyrocketed. People married 25, 30, 35 years. There was a woman I know who she was married 35 or 36 years when she left. And the relationship was never that good. She stayed for the kids. When the last kid left, she stayed a little bit longer so she could get a job, get herself settled, and then she was gone. That idea of gray divorce is more and more popular. And part of the reason for that is that we're living so much longer. There was a day when to get to be 25 years married was a big deal. And in a time when people would say, well, I just hope I live long enough to see my first grandchild. We're living long enough now that you're not only seeing your grandchildren, you're seeing them get married. So that till death do you part is way longer than it ever was before. So the past had limited options, but now you have a new alternative, and the new alternative is that reset for your marriage. You can reset, and it's healthy to do that. The reset is so good because here's the thing. Everything changes, life changes, and we're living in a world that changes so fast that sometimes it's hard to keep up from month to month and week to week. And when things happen, you start thinking differently, you feel differently, you see things differently. And what happens very often is you change, your partner changes, but you don't talk about what those changes are. So you sort of and that's how you start to fall apart from each other. So what a relationship reset is, it's a way of taking It's putting a pin in the timeline of your marriage to take a deep pause, say, stop. Things have been this way or that way. Now we're going to take a deep pause. Let's take a breath and see where we are. And what happens is that you acknowledge the changes. It's like, I never thought I would feel this way, but then this happened and it really made me think differently. And maybe that's about politics or social issues or getting older. It could be anything, but maybe you never thought that way before. And now you do. And maybe your partner doesn't know that. So in the relationship reset, you're rethinking that. You're looking at old, outdated agreements. Agreements that the example I always use for this that most people get is this. Maybe at the beginning of your relationship, you send out cards. And most often when I have this conversation, it's with women. And I ask them, who sends out the cards in your family? And the woman will say, well, I do. You send them out to your family and friends, right? Yes, of course. And, anniversary, Christmas, like that. And you send them out to your spouse's family and friends also. Well, yes, of course. And did you ever have that conversation about that you were going to do that? Well, no, I just do it. Well, that's an unspoken agreement. And if you have that unspoken agreement that you may like, that might be something you get a big kick out of doing. You like it. But if you have one unspoken agreement like that, you probably have plenty others that are unspoken agreements. I knew that when my spouse and my spouse is Joseph, at the very beginning, I said to him, I'll do my family, you do your family. I didn't want to be responsible for sending out cards to anybody else except the people that I felt like I really wanted to send them out to. Now, eventually there were family members that I got closer to that I was good sending cards out to, but the bottom line still was, I send to my family and friends, you send to your family and friends. And I let my in-laws know that so that they didn't say, oh, you didn't send me a card. And now I will admit, if somebody's anniversary or birthday is coming up, I'll say to Joseph, so-and-so's birthday is coming up. Do you think you want to send them a card? And that'll learn because he probably wouldn't think of it. But once I do, then he's good about going out and getting a card. That's his job with his family. Sometimes you have that, but you have old outdated agreements that like that. Like, we're both not working right now. There's no reason why I should be doing all this stuff. How come I'm still doing it and you're having a good time? That is something I hear from people. There's unproductive patterns that maybe you got into a habit of, okay, I'll do the dishes and you can take out the trash. Maybe that's a simple one. That's an easy unproductive. That's a simple pattern that maybe has now become unproductive. Maybe you don't need to be, maybe both of you need to be doing the dishes, or maybe you're both cooking, so whoever cooks doesn't do the dishes. Trash might be, you're both home, the trash goes out however it goes out, and one person puts it out and the other person takes it in. Those are simple patterns, but you get the point. They're simple, easy patterns to talk about, but there are probably other patterns that are more difficult to talk about. So in your deep pause, you're looking at those things. You're rethinking those old outdated agreements, those old outdated patterns, and you're renegotiating. You're saying, we did this all this time, but maybe we need to change. That this particular pattern or this particular agreement doesn't work for me anymore. How about if we change it and make a new agreement around it? And when you come to doing that, then you regroup and you get yourself a fresh start. I will tell you this, whenever you're doing that, I always, and I'll probably say it again before the end of our session here, but you're always looking for progress, not perfection, because this is what I notice. See how you have a rubber band, and if you have a rubber band like this and then you stretch it out, it stretches for you, but it doesn't stay like that. You have to stretch it a number of times before you see any significant change. You may have to stretch it a lot of times, but as long as you keep stretching it out, it will lose some of its elasticity and be able to be stretched. That's how I see progress, not perfection, because none of us like to make change. So it's hard that way. You know, if you're like this, you're willing, like this first stretch might be, I'm willing to do this. You know, it's much more comfortable to stay like this. Yeah, I know I said I would do this, but I forgot. Yeah, it's okay, but you know, it's harder than I thought it was going to be. It's easier to stay in that same little circle. So, but if you keep stretching it and not give it up, keep stretching it, it stretches out. So it's something really important for everybody to know and to understand. When you do your relationship reset, here's the roadmap. You have to know what you want to do. So you have to rethink the destination. At the very beginning, you were going someplace, man. Maybe at the very beginning, your plan might have been, we're both going to work till I have kids. Then I'm going to take the time off to stay home and raise the kids. And then I'm going to go back into the workplace. Meanwhile, you're going to be progressing in your career. And then eventually we're going to have an empty nest. And here's what the empty nest will look like. That may have been a destination that you had at one point in time. That might have changed. Somebody might have gotten sick. Something else might have happened that it's like, oh, you know, I started a new business. I don't want to, that whole empty nest thing, that's the time for me to really go out and push my business into the next level. So things might have changed that way. So you have to know what it is that you want. And then you need to know how to do it. And finally, you need to take action, and that's using the ACE method. And the ACE method is like this. The A is for agreements. Again, I'm talking about agreements. One of the biggest problems in relationships, any relationship, whether it's a business or a partnership, is what do we agree on? And how are we agreeing on the same thing? I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with a woman. It wasn't about the 5-year marriage. It was about business partnerships. And we were talking about, she had just posted something on social media about integrity. And I referenced that post and I said, you know, you talked about having integrity in business. When partners have integrity, they may agree on that they want to have their business be living in integrity. But what does that mean? Because what integrity means to one partner is not necessarily what it means to the other partner. So you need to come to agreement on not just what you do, but what those things mean. If let's say it's good health, maybe you have an agreement to live in good health. Well, are you both online on what that means? Like, does good health mean exercise, diet, regular checkups? What does it mean to live your marriage in good health so that you're together? So you have to look at those agreements. We're going to talk a little bit more about those in a minute. The C stands for communication. If you're not talking to each other about these same things and about those changes that I was saying, you think differently, you feel differently, that changes things. When you change and your partner changes, that changes the relationship. So you need to stay in communication. One way that I do it, besides, we'll talk about the curiosity conversation in a minute, But one way that I always think about doing it is, and it's what my spouse and I do, is we have regular family meetings. On average, we have a family meeting. We've been doing this for a long time. So on average, we have a family meeting about every, maybe every 2 months, maybe once a quarter. But every once in a while, things get wonky and like everything gets a little bit crazy. We might have a family meeting more often because we need to talk about what's going on sooner than every 5 or 6, 7 weeks. So A is for agreement, C is for communication, and E is for evaluation. Whenever we start a family meeting, we always start with what went right, because we're always doing something right. It doesn't always seem that way when we're upset about something, but we have done something right. As a couple, we've done something right. Your partner has done something right. You've done something right. And together you've done something right. So you start with what went right. And then the next step is then you say, what didn't go so well? Now, after you've built up a little positive energy about what went right, it's a little easier to talk about the things that didn't go so right. And then the next thing is, how do we solve that problem? When I do a workshop or a retreat or even individual coaching, we do a lot around a problem-solving formula. But if you're never evaluating, you're never figuring out what, the evaluation helps you figure out maybe what agreements you need to change, or how maybe you need to communicate more often. So that's basically the method. So how do you get started? The curiosity conversation is the best way. If you haven't done this for a long time, and maybe you have never done it in your whole married life or your whole relationship, or maybe you used to do it at the very beginning and then stopped, and you lose touch with each other. So the curiosity conversation is a chat. It's a chat. I see it as being sort of like a second or a third date. You remember, first dates are always sort of tense and icky. By the second date, if you really like somebody, then you're more interested in what they're doing. And by the third date, like you really want to get into their life. So I see the curiosity conversation as like a second or third date chat. And what you're doing is reintroducing yourselves. And you're thinking about how things have changed inside of you that are changing the relationship. The curiosity conversation lays the foundation for the next steps to go forward. So when you have a curiosity conversation, the way that you get it started is you make an agreement, make sure that people have come to me and they've said, well, I want to do it, but my partner doesn't. Well, that's sort of not going to work out well. If you want to have a curiosity conversation and your partner's resistant, then that makes it difficult. But if you frame it as that we're just going to have a chat about these couple questions, that because I feel like I'm out of touch with you. I feel like I don't know who you are anymore, or I feel like we're starting to go in different directions, and I want us to stay going in the same direction. So you agree to do it. You set a date, just like the way that you would make a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment. You make a date to do it. You put it on the calendar. You figure out what questions you're going to have, and then you share those in advance. And then the idea is that you do them separately, because it's hard when you're together and you're just getting the questions for the first time. So you want to do them separately and have something to bring with you to the curiosity conversation. I always tell people, take it outside the home. If you're in the house, there's kids around. There might be kids around, or there's noise, or somebody's doing lawn, or something's going on. Or what's more likely to happen, and why I realized at the beginning to take it out of the house, it's very easy to have that when it gets tense, that somebody could very easily get ticked off and walk away. or you could start raising your voice. Both of those are unproductive to the curiosity conversation. If you take it out of the house, say to a local coffee shop or like a Panera or someplace, you are more likely to sit and work it out in an even tone. You're not as likely to get up and storm out of Panera's or raise your voice. You're more likely to sit down and come to some kind of an agreement, even if it's, I need to think about this more. Can we shelve this till the next meeting? Set a time limit. These conversations are not always particularly easy. So in having the conversation, you kind of don't want it to drag on until it's like beating an old horse to death. You don't want to do that. Set a time limit. An hour is good. You could go as long as maybe an hour, 15, hour, 30 minutes, but that's the max. If you need to talk about more things, set up another meeting, but don't make it go on forever, because if you have something that gets itchy that you need to have a conversation about, you don't want to say, okay, well, we'll finish this now. We have 4 more things to talk about. An hour is a good enough time. And as I said, progress, not perfection. It's very likely when you're doing a reset in particular that it's going to take a couple of meetings, because the first one is you're just reintroducing yourself to the other person. And that sort of sounds like a little odd if you're living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, but stuff goes on so fast in the world, and there's like this thing on social media, this thing on television. And what you want to be able to do really is to have that conversation and say, these things are happening and they're changing my ideas about whatever, about this group of people or this ideology or this township or, whatever, but you need to have the time to think about that. So what do you say? Well, always I think the hardest thing is to say what it is that you want. When I talk to people, men and women, it's really easy for them to say, I'm really tired of this, or I don't want that. And when we have, it's hard to say, it's hard to go forward if you're always saying what you don't want. That he's driving me crazy and I don't want him to do X, Y, Z anymore. Or she just is constantly nagging me and I don't like that. And it's not helpful if you're always talking about what you don't want. You need to get really clear about what you do want. For example, if somebody's being a nag, that then say, well, what is it about that? What would I want instead? So what seems to help a lot of people is to say, here, make a list of the things they don't want, and then find the opposite side of that. It's like, well, I don't want, maybe it's drinking. I don't want so much drinking in the house. So what would you rather have instead? Well, let's keep it down to drinking only on the weekends. Or I don't want to have to be doing the bills all the time. So what would you want instead? Well, I think it'd be easier if we split up how we do the bills. So sometimes looking at what you don't want, as unproductive as that is, if you flip it around, you can get to what it is that you do want. And that helps you with your agreements, and it helps you with your behaviors. If certain agreements, like the cards thing, maybe you've decided, I don't want to be doing all the cards all the time, so let's renegotiate that agreement to see what works. Different behaviors. I spoke to a woman about 2 weeks ago, and she said, I want him to be more loving. I want him to be closer to me. I feel like we're not close. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, well, I don't know. I want him to touch me. And I said, well, but how do you want him to touch you? Is it about sex? No, that the sex part wasn't an issue. This was about affection. So the more we talked, the clearer she got that she needed more affection. And then she got clear about what would be affection to her. Because for some people, affection would be hugs. Other people would be, like a pat on the back. So the clearer that you get, if you're wanting something like affection to say this and that, then that makes it easier for your partner to know what it is that you want. You and your partner, neither one of you are mind readers. So you need to be really clear and really specific with each other so that you can figure that part out. And when you say, for example, I need for you to give me a hug, and it would be helpful to me if every day you hugged me in a nice way, not like, this is my time to hug you, so I'm going to do that. No, to give me a genuine hug once a day. That would mean the world to me, and it would mean the world to me because I would feel that's something we used to do a lot before. We stopped doing it. When we stopped doing it, it made me feel really disconnected from you. So you're being specific about a behavior and why that matters. And so what can we do differently now? And what needs to be sort of backburnered? We can do these 3 things now. You don't want to say, here's 10 things. We came up with 10 things. Remember, things don't bounce easily. It's hard to make those stretches. So here's 2 things that we could do in the next month that we could both focus on. Maybe it's, I really would like you to acknowledge me more. I feel invisible. If you would say thank you once in a while, or if you would make me a cup of tea at night, or if you would tell me that you think I'm doing a good job at work. Those are small things that you can do, but they help bridge that gap. It's part of keeping that connection with each other. So before we go through, let me go back a little bit and ask you, what questions might you have?
Okay, now I'm just curious about the questions, and you did go over that a little bit, but that's a tough question. How do we start the questioning? Start with what you're doing right, and go from there. I have to sit down and think about it.
Yeah, there's some of the questions, Eileen, would be, it starts with you and say, what do I want? Mm-hmm. And then with your partner, what does your partner want? And then that then enables you to have a conversation. If you don't even know what you want, you just like, I'm not happy, or I'm upset about something. The further away, the more nebulous things are, I would say that the harder it is to have that conversation. Right. The more specific you are, then the easier it makes that conversation. And it would be like, go through some of your agreements. Like what are agreements that may, bills, or who's doing the bills? That's a fairly common one. Mm-hmm. There's a couple that I spoke with, and what their issue, they had an interesting situation, that in a sad situation, they had lost a child. And so in the time of having kids and then losing a child, and after they lost their child, they got they did right things. They went to a grief counselor. They got involved in a group where they were able to process their grief. The grief counselor helped them. But then what they did was they threw themselves into being parents, and they focused just on the kids. And when they came to me, they were like, we don't even know each other anymore. I still love him, I still love her, but I don't even know what to do. So when they did that, they had to go back and say, in the what do I want? I want to find a hobby we can do together. I want us to have a conversation once a week about us. I want to go back to having a date night once a month. So they didn't like what was happening, but they had to start with like, what was that itch that was in the back of their head that was like, this isn't working. This isn't, I'm not as happy as I want to be.
Mm. So it just takes time to think about that.
It does. And that is why when you make your appointment to have your curiosity conversation, you figure out what the questions are in advance. Like, let's make a list of the things that we really like, that we really want to do in 2022. What are we not so happy that's going on, and how can that be different? So you kind of have to sort of back into it, and then share your answers. Every once in a while I get really surprised with my spouse that we'll be having this conversation, and I'll say, I didn't know you felt that way. Like, when did you start feeling that way? Because, because I whatever that topic is, I thought I knew how he thought. And at one point in time he did.
And he changed.
And then he changed.
Right.
And that whole idea of that change happening, it's like, well, how do you like that?
Yeah.
And so now I have to start rearranging my brain a little bit, because like, well, I was basing certain things, like, I can't think of a good example right this minute, but let's say it was something about business. It's like, well, I have to start thinking about him as he's a different kind of businessman than he was even 15 years ago. He's completely different than he was when he first started his business, but even in the last 10 or 15 minutes, things have changed. So now I have to start thinking of him differently, or maybe his clientele changed, and that shifted his thinking. And I'm still thinking of him having another kind of clientele. So I have to see him differently. And I sometimes think that's an interesting thing to have to start thinking, because I have to stop myself. It's like, well, I know Joseph would like, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, maybe Joseph wouldn't like. So I think that makes a difference. Is that helpful?
Yes. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Chris, do you have anything you want to add?
Are there suggestions in your book about how, like, the questions to start with?
I do, and that's one of the things going forward, that your next steps would be these, that you want to follow through and have your first curiosity conversation. Make a date, get it on the calendar, come up with some ideas of like what you can talk specifically. You can talk generally, like, what don't I like that's happening now, and what do I want instead? So 5 things that you might come up with, or you can say specifically, it might have to do with kids, or it might have to do with a social group, or it might have to do with a job. Like, what's going on that, excuse me, what's going on that I'm not happy about, and what I want to see instead. So you would sort of come up with those questions in advance, and then give each other like a week or 2 to think about them. And I have to tell you this: if we're doing that, I'll write the question down in my day timer, but the answer never comes when I'm looking at it. the answer usually comes like when I'm driving around or I'm doing dishes, or so somewhere in the back recesses of my mind, I'm thinking about something, and the answer, then it's like, oh, that's something I could put that. And then as soon as you get it, write it down. So you could, of course, you can join me on Facebook and Instagram at 5 Year Marriage, and read the 5 Year Marriage book for more ideas and tips. And you can get that on Amazon.com. And if you're an Amazon.com regular member, I can't remember what they call it, but it's free on Amazon.com. You can join me for the next Relationship Reset Mastermind, which is a small group coaching, or you can talk to me. I'm available for one-on-one coaching. So those are some of your next steps, but definitely give a shot for the curiosity conversation, and let me know how that goes, because if it goes well, I want to hear about that. So if that doesn't go so well, maybe I have an idea for you. I'm thanking you for coming today. Okay, welcome back. So what did you think? Did you like it? I hope so. I hope it got you thinking about your relationship and the 5 Year Marriage and how you can reset your relationship or your marriage. You'll remember the first step is the curiosity conversation. So you wonder, like, what am I supposed to be talking about? A man asked me that a little while back. And so for him, I gave him a list of questions, things to talk about. And those have now become the curiosity conversation cheat sheet. And the download to that cheat sheet is my gift to you. And you can get that at annmariekelly.com/curiosity. And on that same page, you'll see a list of tips that will make the curiosity conversation easier and more doable for both of you. So that's the very first thing you need to do is download the curiosity conversation and read the 10 tips and set that appointment up. The second thing you need to do is to get on my newsletter list so that you can know the next time I'm doing a webinar, a free webinar, a paid webinar, a Relationship Reset Mastermind class, something that you'll want to be involved in because they're fabulous. And the third thing that you need to do is go to Amazon and get a copy of my book, The 5 Year Marriage. That's what it looks like. It's full of techniques and ideas that will help you take your relationship to the next level or improve it to where you're really happy with it. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see or hear from you in the future. Bye.